Okay, good afternoon and thank you all for joining us on our webinar today, which is around engaging and retaining BAME talent during COVID-19. Firstly, a huge welcome to my esteemed panel who've joined us this afternoon, and I'm going to allow themselves to do a little intro in a moment so you know a little bit about who is talking to you. So my name's Jenny Hines and I'm a director of the Clear Company. We have been running a series of webinars during this lockdown period, and this is aimed at supporting organisations to make sure that inclusion remains at the top of the agenda, and to support organisations with finding solutions to some of the challenges that different people are experiencing throughout this period. So without further ado, I would like to introduce each of our panelists in turn. So I will start, please, Carol, if you wouldn't mind doing a quick intro.
Sure. Hi and good afternoon, everyone. My name's Carol Campaign and I'm the director of the diversity practice. We've been going since 2003. Our focus is on organisational development, diversity and inclusion, paying particular attention to leaders from ethnic minority backgrounds and women. It's great to be here.
Thank you, Carol. And Mira?
Yeah, sure. So, hi guys, my name is Mira and I am the co-founder and head of partnerships for an organisation called the BYP Network. So what that stands for is Black Young Professionals, and essentially what we are is we're the UK's largest network of Black professionals. We have over 40,000 members in our network. We have an online platform. We run events, which have now moved virtually, and we connect corporations to our talent to help them engage with our talent as well as attract them. My background, so the elephant in the room is usually, Mira, you're not Black, why are you doing this? So I have been brought up in both Kenya and North London, so I'm always back and forth. And I became very quickly interested in understanding racial disparities, particularly when it came to educational attainment in the world of work. And I've spent the last 5+ years in the D&I space, building communities for women in tech, and quickly realized that there was actually a lack of a conversation when it came to intersectionality. So I always saw racism actually from my own community, despite being kind of born and bred in an African country, and also saw the same when I moved to the UK. So I lived in Edmonton Green, and then when I went to university, hardly ever saw Black people there, and even in the world of work. And I met my co-founder. We're both kind of trying to tackle the same thing. So here we are trying to build a community to help increase representation and transform what the Black narrative is, particularly in the professional setting.
Fantastic, thanks, Mira. And I think intersectionality is a theme that we'll definitely draw out as we go through the session today. And last but certainly not least, Tony.
Thanks, Jenny. Hi everyone, my name is Tony McCaffrey. I'm the founder and director of Diversity Scotland. We are a consultancy practice, as the name suggests, based in Scotland, providing support with inclusion and diversity with a particular focus on inclusive hiring for organisations across Scotland. As a person of colour, this particular session today is something which is very close to my heart and something which I've been discussing with a few clients just over the course of this week. So I'm really looking forward to engaging with you all today.
Brilliant. Thank you all. I think we've got a fantastic panel today, and I think the challenge today is going to be trying to keep us to time, because I know from our discussions in advance that there is so much that we could talk about today. However, what we're going to start with is we're actually going to ask those of you who've joined us today to respond to a poll in the first instance. So if I could ask my my team to set up the poll. There we go. Okay, so if you could all respond to the poll, please. So the question is in response to COVID-19. I've lost it on the screen there. Hold on a minute. So in response to COVID-19, how many of you have developed a comprehensive plan of action to engage and retain your BAME talent through and post the crisis? So hopefully you can all see that poll and respond to that on the side. I'm not sure that the poll is working, unfortunately. Hold on. Right, just bear with us a little bit. Nope. Right, okay, we're going to crack on with the rest. Oh, there we go. Okay.
Yes, it's up there now.
It's back now. Perfect. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see the poll and can respond to that now. Okay, so we seem to be having a little challenge with the poll. My apologies for that, but we'll crack on anyway. I guess the starting point for our conversation today is very much around, you know, what has the impact and potentially the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 been on BAME communities and different people through this crisis. And I really want us to think about in this, you know, there's a lot of focus in the inclusion world around people who are, you know, working from home, which is absolutely a big change for people and is a real opportunity from an inclusion perspective moving forward. But what we absolutely need to remember is that not everybody is in that situation. Of course, we have people who are on furlough, we have people who are key workers, and equally we have different situations across the 4 nations of the UK in terms of where we are around lockdown and the different impacts of that kind of continued isolation for some people. Yeah, I'm just going to open that up to the panel, and Mira, would you like to respond first on that one?
Yeah, so I mean, firstly, what I'd like to say is, just statistically speaking, and I think this is something that we've all kind of heard of, is that Black and minority ethnics are disproportionately definitely impacted from COVID-19. So a statistic, for example, is we make up, what, 13% of the population, but account for 35% of COVID-related deaths. And of course, there are many reasons for this. You know, we've got low socioeconomic neighborhoods. Something that I've seen in my family a lot is crowded houses and intergenerational of people living in intergenerational households. You know, preemptive conditions, and of course, like service workers. You see, you know, your cleaners, carers, and nurses mainly come from kind of BAME background. So those are the kind of reasons behind it. But something else that's quite interesting is the industries that aren't really that impacted. For example, tech also disproportionately are, you know, notoriously known for not having a lot of BAME representation. So we're already seeing kind of the struggles, or, you know, inequalities kind of being pushed through, and this virus is kind of presenting it more significantly. And when it comes to furloughed workers, I mean, the 3 things I always say that affects the community most in this period is, you know, mental health challenges from working from home. Secondly, financial challenges. You know, if you have been furloughed and you are looking after your family, you know, there's usually something called like the Black and Asian tax. You know, are you looking after your family? Are you a is your income not just supporting yourself but others within? And then thirdly, like upskilling. Like, if you are going to lose your job, what can we do to make sure we're staying ahead of the game? So that's what I'm going to say for now. I'd love to hear from others as well.
I think your point there. Sorry. I was just going to say that I think your point there, Mira, about the financial impact, the socio-economic impact is absolutely key. And it's not just for those who are furloughed, it's also for those working from home. You know, that potential increase in fuel poverty, you know, access to fast, reliable internet connection at home, the increased cost of meals at home where there are children who would normally be entitled to free school meals, that kind of thing. There are so many impacts from a socio-economic perspective that I don't believe are being talked about just as openly as some of the other challenges.
No, I mean, absolutely. I think we're going to end up almost just reinforcing what we've all said. There's the financial impact, there's the social impact. Well, I think the thing for me, and it is actually quite personal, is the psychological impact that this has had, which is a bit of an intangible. You know, when I led some research not too long ago called Different Women, one of the things that, and these are, you know, women from BAME backgrounds, one of the things that they said is that whilst I might not have experienced racism as an example, I know that others have. And because other people who look like me have, it has that boomerang effect. And the same thing is happening for, you know, our BAME professionals in organizations who may or may not have lost loved ones, and quite a number absolutely have because of that disproportional impact. But they're also carrying an additional psychological, emotional weight. So for example, my daughter who lives in the States, works for a big investment bank, she has had to take time out because her considerations are now not just about her own well-being and health. She had COVID herself, but also the impact that that's having on those closest to her who could potentially be at risk of the virus, plus all the other things that BAME professionals carry, from microaggression, stereotyping, that invisible knapsack that you know we also carry. So that is the deadly impact of this, you know, of this virus, and the structural systemic issues of discrimination that this has actually proved.
And Carol, I want to jump in on that and say, like, just even the stuff you hear on the news with the police brutality,
right.
with, you know, BME people more likely to be fined for COVID, even though you've got Dominic Cummings, who's just being let off scot-free. These things really impact you. You're watching the news, you're seeing your people constantly being condemned,
tortured,
ranked, and you've got the virus. Yeah, so there is a whole bunch of that. But I want to say just one thing in terms of the financial side of things. So, like BYP Network, we had a fundraiser. So we have a fundraiser going on right now. We wanted to raise £10,000 fund for risk workers and their families. So we actually exceeded that target. So we're at about £11,000 now, and we want to raise money for people who are struggling financially, especially if you're a key worker struggling to pay the bills. And we've exceeded the target, but we've got about 200 applications that we're not able to fund because essentially we just don't have the money. So we've reached about 11,000. So if you guys are interested in funding kind of Black key workers, we've got a fund for that as well.
I mean, those initiatives are really important. I mean, I've just come off facilitating an action learning set for BAME professionals in one of my client organizations, and the kind of weight that they're carrying. I mean, we're all responding to this virus, but I think the key message, for me, is that whilst the virus has impacted on all of us globally, it's impacted on some of us more than others. And I think that that's something that we absolutely need to hold. And that's in terms of what I'm hearing, that's very, very, very real.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And although unfortunately our poll for some reason wouldn't work there, so my apologies again there, but certainly from the organisations that we work with at the Clear Company, which is a broad range of organisations, and the rest of the panel also work with a wide range of organisations, and in our experience this is not something that employers are being proactive around, and not something that employers are really kind of taking into consideration in terms of their planning, both during this crisis and as we hopefully start to emerge out the other end of it into a new normal. So I think it's absolutely critical that organisations really become far more aware of the impact on different people, and take really proactive steps in order to help those within their organisation. And obviously, Mira, what you're doing in terms of fundraising to support key workers is absolutely incredible, and clearly the demand is higher, even though you've exceeded your target, which is kind of very telling in its own way, isn't it? So Okay, so I think, you know, there's clearly, you know, a story to be heard here, that at the moment, you know, I think we can all agree is probably, you know, not getting the airtime and recognition that it requires. So in terms of you know, inclusion can typically fall down the agenda at times of crisis anyway. I think we're quite heartened actually that during this crisis we have seen a lot of organisations using inclusion as part of the solution. But you know, I can't say that that's an overall theme, much as, you know, we're very much working with clients in that way. But you know, are organisations continuing to be proactive about engaging with BAME talent, with either with existing employees or during the recruitment process? And Tony, perhaps I could come to you first on that one.
Yeah, I think progressive organisations are continuing to do that. I think it's encouraging that some of the organisations that I work with have not sidelined their agenda or sidestepped their agenda when it comes to increasing the pipeline of BAME talent into their organisation. And I think also it's been very encouraging to see, and I was speaking with one FMCG client just this morning who, and I know we'll touch on this perhaps later in this session, but who's been really working closely from their resourcing team perspective to their BAME employee network group, and having both of those groups within the organisation working really closely together to encourage connection and to encourage open communication. So that's for me something that has been very encouraging, but it's absolutely essential that the organisations don't sidestep from that agenda to focus on their BAME talent efforts more now than ever, given the difficulty that people from BAME backgrounds will have if they are finding themselves out of work, the difficulty they'll have finding getting back into the workplace. So there's an actual opportunity here for organisations to do better, given that there's likely, unfortunately, going to be more people from a BAME background looking for work in the near future.
Absolutely. Just to pick up on a comment that's been posted by one of our attendees today, which I think is really valuable to share, is that where BAME key workers are linked to the NHS, it's really important that they access NHS charities together, because they have expressed their wish to ensure that those from BAME communities do benefit from that. I think, you know, it's a almost crazy state of affairs that we're relying on charities, you know, in any way, shape or form at this point of crisis. However, you know, that is one option for those who are linked to the NHS. So thank you for sharing that. I think that's really powerful. So Carol, I don't know if you want to build on what Tony has talked about there.
Yes, absolutely. You know, when in kind of thinking about the pandemic and the crisis that we're facing, one of the things that you know, I'm really always aware of is that situations like this really reveal the character of organizations. Right? That's what emerges. What emerges as being a priority is, you know, is what matters. And it really saddens me. Obviously I kind of worked through the 2008 crisis. We know that ethnic minorities fared less well, from retention to unemployment. So across all of those particular data sets, that did have a direct impact on the very communities that are being affected right now. And so there's something about having a value around diversity and inclusion, and having a diversity and inclusion lead or practitioner and team. And there's something even more important, that in the moment, are you really in the arena? Are you really living the value of, you know, really ensuring that in terms of race equality, that ambition is raised? And it's I think it's actually quite saddening that we almost sometimes accept that in a moment of crisis or a recession or a turn in the economy, that diversity and inclusion becomes a nice thing to have, and doesn't really matter. I think there must be a place for us to really challenge the status quo, really challenge the status quo on this, because it's become kind of part of what we've normalized. And how do we shift away from that? And I think that's certainly the role that the agents of change like us play.
Yeah, absolutely, Caroline. I really love your kind of opening comment there about, this crisis does really reveal the character of organisations, and I think that's something that organisations potentially have not given enough thought to, whilst distracted by potential financial implications or the challenges of running some key services. I think it's very easy for that focus to fall by the wayside. So got quite a number of questions popping up, so I'm going to kind of weave them in as we go through, if that's okay. But the kind of next question, which links very nicely, I'm just scrolling back up, is I think for you, Mira, I think this is a particularly pertinent question. So how do organisations focus on BAME talent but without falling foul of being exclusive, which is a question that we get asked a lot, and I'm sure you do too. So I'll let you respond to that one first, Mira.
Yeah, so that's a really good question, and you also don't want to come across as discriminatory. Like, are you just targeting one group for the sake of it, to tick a box? And the point is that's not what we should be doing at all. But the statistics show that it actually does become quite necessary to do so. So, for example, I think this is on the poll, and I don't know if the polls are working, but BME professionals need to apply for 80% more roles to get the same opportunities as their white counterparts. Now, to me, that is something that is entirely shocking. And the reasons for that are, one, like lack of connection. So a lot of people get jobs through the people that they know. So if you don't know that many people in high up positions, can you get referred into a company? Probably not. Secondly, it's just a case of bias. We all know about application biases happen. And thirdly, a lack of preparation. Like, if you don't have someone in your family who can help you through psychometric testing or things like that, like, can you get through the next stages? You might still be very good, but are you able to take that first step within your career? Probably not. So we're seeing that huge discrepancy. But also, I've had clients who are like, oh, we are really targeting the BAME community by creating content for them, but we don't have anywhere to, if we post it on our LinkedIn, for example, it just gets seen by the same people. So it's not actually targeted. So LinkedIn is a general platform, and people who already know who you are going to interact with you. So the best way to do that is through working with organizations that have built communities for this very purpose. Now, go back to BYP. Like, we have built a community from the ground up 3 or 4 years ago with actually no real intention for it being a corporate thing. It became a community of like-minded professionals who don't see themselves in the workplace and want to meet people who look like them and who come from similar background. That's why we started. And from a small event in central London 3 or 4 years ago, we're now a 40,000 large platform that focuses on professional development of the Black community. So these are like really authentic ways to target those groups. So if you've created that content, why don't you share it specifically and engage with groups like ours, or groups for disabled people, or groups for there's networks and platforms for the LGBT community. So why, like, those they exist for that very reason, essentially, so you can engage with them, but in a non-discriminatory way. Like, these people probably don't know that you're hiring. Like, I remember when Google DeepMind and Netflix first posted on our job board, people would message us saying they want to hire people, like, they want to hire us, really? Like, this is specifically for us? And we're like, yeah, like, these companies want you, they just don't know where to find you. And we're creating a platform where they're able to do that, because historically they go to the top universities, and we know what BAME representation in top universities look like. So we're trying to basically make it easier as well for companies to actually say, okay, we want to engage with this talent, and here's where you get it. But obviously it's the same opportunities, it's just making it just increasing that visibility. And that's why platforms like us exist, and you can do it in a non-discriminatory way as well.
Can I just say as well, I think, sorry, Carol, just thinking about retention for a moment as well, I think that organisations right now need to be really mindful of how they're measuring productivity at the moment as well. You know, with so many employees not working in their usual workplace, we end up running the risk of measuring access rather than actually measuring performance, you know, and perhaps not taking into account things like overcrowded homes or caring responsibilities. So organisations need to focus on the retention of their BAME talent as well, and perhaps take a different approach to measuring employees at the moment, because that's just as crucial. You know, we can do all that we can to attract a diverse range of people into the organisation, but if we're not then looking at how we measure differently right now, and as we start to ease restrictions, then we run the risk of losing the people that we've worked so hard to try and attract in the first place.
Yeah.
And I think on that point of retention, one of the things, again, I think that we need to be really mindful of, and you know, in terms of the work that we've all done, and I do with BAME talent across public sector, private sector, etc., is really move away from the deficit model. You know, the reason why organizations need to recruit, engage, and retain BAME talent is because they bring a diversity of leadership strengths to the table. You know, so you know, I hear a lot about what we need to do to help. And actually, when I talk to BAME professionals, you know, they're very grounded in who they are. They are extremely highly competent. 9 times out of 10, they are better educated. They've had to navigate environments where they are the minority in a majority context. They have a set of skills and capabilities that need to be acknowledged and validated and, you know, and owned by organizations. So, you know, from where I'm sitting as we have this conversation, this is not about the kind of, you know, the kind of begging bowl and here's what you must do to help. It's about recognizing, as great organizations who are paying very close attention to their BAME talent, in recognizing the competencies that they bring. They're not shying away. They're not stopping their diversity and inclusion efforts. They recognize the value that they bring, and they're paying attention to that. So this narrative around, so, you know, I think it was Toni Morrison who said, in terms of, you know, and she talked about racism as a distraction. There's always another thing that, you know, we are meant to do. And I think it's important for us at this point to recognize right now the value that BAME talent bring. How can we, and what is it that we need to continue doing to ensure that we are not bleeding this talent at this time? And I think for me, that's a critical. I'm not buying into that kind of deficit narrative. That's the, you know, that's an easy one to go on about in some senses.
Yeah, I think a big thing we always say is that people say the talent doesn't exist, but we prove very quickly that it does, and it's very like incredible talent does exist, and you just need to look in the right places. And I completely like back what you say in that, Carol.
One of the questions we've had through Carol says, what can employers do to encourage their minority staff to share their challenges and concerns during COVID-19, which I think is an interesting question. I don't know what your response to that would be.
You know, one of the things that we've been working with our clients with is around how do you really create safe spaces? And I know we're going to come and we're going to talk about networks in a moment. I have a particular perspective on that, but it really is important to first of all recognize that we do need to create spaces for conversations that are really focused on, so what impact has COVID-19 had on you? And so we've begun a series of what we're calling kind of race inclusion pods, where people can talk about their lived experience. So what has it been like? What has your experience of this been? What impact has it had on you? You know, if in terms of, you know, how confident are you around issues of employment and uncertainty, but where they bring those real live issues to the table in a safe and a secure environment. that I think is an important, at least it's a, it certainly is a first step, that those that lead them should lead them excellently well by having, one-to-one conversations, if that indeed is and I think that's what good leadership actually looks like, but certainly creating those safe spaces that are facilitated safe spaces where that data is gathered, so we're not just reacting or responding to what we think those issues and those needs are.
I think that's such an important point about not making assumptions as well, and really listening to what's happening for people. And I think a lot of organisations that don't have the foundation of an inclusive culture have got to work very hard to create those safe spaces. So I hear, I read a lot of what you're saying is absolutely resonating with me, Carol. So we have a whole host of questions in now around what can employers do. So what are the steps that employers can take to support BAME employees as the country begins to open up, and obviously recognising that that we're all at different stages in terms of that opening up. So Tony, do you want to kind of kick off with what are the practical steps that employers can think about?
Sure. I think for me, the first and most important thing that employers can do is to very publicly recognise to their workforce that there is disproportionate impact to people from BAME communities. I think it's, there's no point skirting around the issue, and in actual fact it needs to be quite blatantly named, so that employees are aware that the organisation has a clear understanding of it and a clear focus on it. I think the second thing is being prepared to be far more flexible than normal in every possible sense. So be able to show real patience and understanding, taking into account that disproportionate impact. That to me is really, really important. Just that flexibility, openly recognising it, and then providing the patience, the support, the understanding that may be needed by some people. And then I think that the other key area for me would be about encouraging connection. So this is where ERGs have a really important role. So encouraging connection within the organisation to other professionals out with the organisation. If you look at things like the BYP network, which I've learned a lot more about this week, that sounds phenomenal. But I think using that example from one of my clients this morning as well, where you have the ERG working very closely with the resourcing function to increase the connection from an employer brand perspective, in ensuring that people coming towards the organisation and being interested in opportunities are getting a better sneak preview of what it's like within the company once they're there. But I think, that encouraging connection, making sure that ERGs are really monitoring the emotional well-being of individuals within the organisation as well.
Yeah, I totally stand behind that. I want us to just bring in a point about something that we're seeing a lot of is upskilling. So in this time, I've never seen more conversation about, what is the future of work going to be and what skills are necessary. And with BAME communities, is how do we not get left behind? So it's a case of like, how do you engage with your current workforce? So if people are, the job security is probably they feel the lowest at this time. How do you have an open dialogue with them to help people understand where is the company going, what skills are going to be most necessary, and is your job even going to be relevant? If not, how do we ensure you will be relevant? So how do you upskill current people who are in the workforce who are worried about their job security and their finances, and then reassure them? And secondly, you can do this externally as well. So for example, we are running webinars with Nationwide, with Facebook, with Microsoft, all about actually upskilling the community, our community, to help them with what's going to happen in the post-COVID economy. and then also presenting them with opportunities at these companies. So for example, we're running a webinar with Nationwide about building resilience and life after COVID. And the webinar is to improve people's, like, the community's knowledge and skills in finance, in housing, in these different departments, and then directing them to potential roles that Nationwide will have maybe in the next 3 months or not. So it's like, that's how you engage externally, but also internally, where there is job insecurity, like how do you ensure that your current workforce are keeping upskilled and they feel supported by you? And then of course the ERGs, like I know I speak to ERG leaders all the time. Some say that this is a time where they're not meeting each other or they're not doing much because they don't have, they don't have events to go to, or they don't have a physical place to meet. So it's about like actually making that a business objective to ensure that your ERGs are actually effectively engaging with each other in this period.
Can I pick up on employee resource groups, because I think that they are absolutely key and they are critical, and they do not take the place of the corporate infrastructure that is there to respond to the needs of ethnic minority staff in organizations. I think sometimes, and having worked in this space, we place a lot of emphasis on what networks can do. And it's important that they're properly resourced. It's important that we build their capacity. They are, that they are given the requisite skills as agents of change to be able to support the organization in that way. And I think that there are different levels of maturity of networks. Not every network is at the the same stage. So one of my clients has invested very heavily in providing almost it's kind of executive coaching as an agent, as agents of change, to really ensure that as we go through this particular, navigate this environment, that they're properly equipped. The other thing I think that organizations can do, there's some big decisions that are being made as we talk about this new normal, a term that is kind of a bit grating, but I think in this space, in the race space, we're looking for a new tomorrow. There's certain things that we cannot go back to. And so that even, that the language in and of itself needs to be more, I think, much more progressive, much more charged, much more robust, much more ambitious than it is currently. And the decisions that are being made, the key question around what is emerging in terms of this future world, the big question is whose voice is not in the room? Whose voice is not here? Who are we not considering? There should be mechanisms for thinking about. I know in the in the NHS and the public sector we talk about impact assessments. So is there, as we're furloughing and making these big decisions around who we retain, who stays and who goes, are we doing impact assessments? Are we actually monitoring in terms of our data set who is going to be most affected? Around intersectionality, I really want to bring this to bear, that whilst we may be paying attention to women and the gender agenda, the reality is that 9 times out of 10, our focus on gender is not intersectional. We're not thinking about the impact of this particular situation on the diversity of women that make up, that make up that particular cohort. And so taking that and applying that intersectional lens, asking who's not in the room, monitoring the data sets around mental health. Again, mental health, we know that ethnic minorities are more disproportionately impacted upon. The occupational therapy that we might have, all our well-being units and places to go may not necessarily be culturally competent enough to understand the nuances of the lived experiences of BAME employees. So those are some real practical touch points that I think organizations can immediately pay attention to. And for me, those are quick wins. Those are low-hanging fruits.
Yeah, I think you raised some really fantastic points there, Carol. And I think the concept of a new tomorrow as opposed to a new normal, that whole that whole thing about we are not going back. We are not going back to how it was. We can't allow that to happen. So what does that new tomorrow look like? I think that's, you know, a really insightful thought for organisations to consider. We do have you know, a whole host of questions, so I apologise in advance to people that we're not going to be able to answer all of those questions here, as we've only got a few minutes left on the session today. I mean, where does the time go? It's always the same challenge, but we will share those questions with today's panel, and we will respond to you individually after the event at some point next week for those whose questions haven't been answered. So our apologies, but as you can see, the time runs away with us very, very quickly. So any concluding comments from you, from any of you, that you really wanted to get across before we conclude the webinar today?
Mine's more just a point, as opposed to, because I don't know the answer to this one, is obviously I work more in the talent attraction side of things. So how do we start to attract diverse talent? And then of course, you know, in terms of inclusion, that becomes like what we talk about after, once people are placed in. But one big thing that we have seen is a drop off in the companies that we work with, because people aren't actually actively recruiting in this time. So what then happens is generally the talent market becomes a lot less competitive. So what I've seen is you either have two kinds of companies. One who's like, well, diversity now can be put on a back burner because actually talent is very much widely available when we're going to need it. And before, diversity was a thing for us because talent was scarce and we needed to look in many different pools. And then you've got the second group who are like, nope, it's still the most important thing to us, and we still want to ensure that we're hiring inclusively, and we would still work with you. So I'm not really sure what the landscape is going to be moving forward, given how the talent ecosystem is drastically changing post-COVID. So it's only something I can infer and look forward to. But I'd love to hear if any of you have any thoughts on that, and what your kind of predictions are.
So I guess my focus is very much on the whole pipeline.
Yeah.
You know, so from that point of view of, you know, recruitment to retention. I think the retention is a big thing, and the importance of not sitting on your hands. If there was ever a time to legitimately talk about race, it's now. Now is the time to talk about race. For you know, the deadly, in many senses, in terms of this deadly virus, and what it has shown very clearly around structural and systemic issues of racism and discrimination. And we know the story. Now is the time to leverage that in a good way and live the values of diversity and inclusion. Because I guess the reality is, at some point we will look back and we will know the organizations who did, and we'll know the organizations that didn't. And BAME leaders are always a choice in terms of where they invest their talents. That's and I think that needs to be recognized too.
And I think for me that's where looking forward to ethnicity pay gap reporting, because of the wider impact that will have, and the awareness raising that it will help achieve, is something that we should look forward to. I mean, it's not going to be without its problems, and will create lots of challenges, I'm sure. But I think the sooner we can see that implemented and start to become part of the regular narrative within organisations, the greater that awareness will be, and will help us to achieve so much more.
Absolutely. So I think some absolutely you know, incredibly helpful and insightful thoughts there, and you know, I guess I'd just like to wrap up by you know, just picking up on Carol's point there about, you know, this is the time which you've all talked about, you know, this is the time to recognise, you know, what has happened historically to make that change. And I guess if there's just one plea to organisations, it is please don't do nothing, because that, you know, that is going to be the worst case scenario. And any one of us would be incredibly delighted to help any organisations that need some support in working their way through this, to understand how they can best navigate their way through what is, you know, really unique circumstances that we're all, you know, kind of finding our way. So yeah, I think some you know, so much to think about, and we really could go on all day. For any attendees today who are not aware, the Clear Company have launched a free COVID-19 inclusion toolkit, and it touches on all aspects of inclusion, the intersectionality between lots of different people and the impacts of this whole situation, and how organisations, with some very practical tools and guidance on how organisations can support their people and can use this as a real opportunity to advance the inclusion agenda in a very progressive and positive way. So please do take a look at our website, where you can get yourself set up with that toolkit, or again contact one of the team, and we will absolutely get you set up. And next week we'll be launching our kind of transition toolkit as well. So, you know, as we start to move out of this crisis period, what are the things that organisations need to think about from an inclusion perspective? And please do not put your inclusion strategy on the back burner at this time, because I promise you it can be a fundamental part of the solution, as we have absolutely heard from our panel today. So a huge thank you then to Carol, Mira and Tony. It's been such an incredible conversation, and you've all made an absolutely you know, amazing contribution today, so I really very much appreciate that. And thank you to those who have joined us. We hope that you found this insightful and useful, and we are running a webinar next week on Friday the 5th, which is discussing the impact on the LGBTQ+ community. So if that's something of interest, then again, please do sign up. But we will leave it there, because as always, we've run over our allocated time frame. We always do. There's always too much to say, but thank you all very much, and we hope to hear from you soon. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.